Hello, everybody. Thank you. Welcome for, thank you. And no, God, never mind. It's too hot here.
Shall I start us
10
off?
seconds in, and Sam is going to take over because Kerry can't speak today, apparently. Marvelous. Take it away, Sam, please and thank you.
Welcome everyone to Shadows and Secrets. We are a retreat slash online community for mystery, thriller, suspense, and horror authors. And this
This
is
is
the
the
second. Oh, wow, we have some feedback. Carrie, can you mute the people that are not us? Rough start, everybody. We're just here to have fun. It's July 3rd, and
Exactly.
what a delight of a day we are having. Okay, so this is the second of our public webinars that we are doing for Shadows and Secrets this year. This is free for all. We're going to record it. So if you did not make it today, we will be sending out the recording in a few hours to our email list, and you're welcome to share it with your writerly friends. We do these because we love talking about craft and we love talking about MTS, and we want to just be good literary citizens and put it out into the world. So today's topic is foundational story concepts in mystery, thriller, and suspense. It also applies to horror, but Carrie and I feel that this is sort of the baseline of what one needs to know about writing a novel in this space. And of course, there are a million other directions you can go with everything, but these are like the main foundational concepts that we teach in our retreat and in our online community. And we have found time and time again that they are an excellent sort of scaffolding to put your story around, and they are very useful. And we both now use them in our work. So,
Indeed, we do.
yeah.
So quickly, we'll just talk a little bit about who we are and what we offer. So we are Shadows and Secrets. I am Kerry. That is Sam. We are both experienced book coaches. We are both obsessed with mystery, thriller, suspense, and horror. We love, love, love scary fiction. We love twists. We are both certified with Author Accelerator as book coaches. And Shadows and Secrets, both the writing retreat and the society, our online community, were the things that like we wanted to see in the writing world, and we didn't see them out there, so we decided to build them. And that is why we're all here. Sam, you
All
want to talk a
right.
little bit more
Who am
about
I?
yourself?
Yep, I sure do. There is me with hair. Hi, everyone. I don't have hair anymore, but it's growing back, so I'm really pleased with that. My focus as a coach is mystery, thriller, suspense, and horror. I do novel planning all the way through agent pitching, and I particularly love twist brainstorming. So that is where I love to sit. And just if I could do it all day, every day, I absolutely would. And that is my goal. So here we are. I am the executive director of Thriller Fest, which just happened a couple weeks ago. If you were there, hi, thank you so much for coming. I hope you had a great time. I am a Women's Fiction Writers Association mentor, even though they don't do that anymore, sadly. But it was a great, yeah, they stopped doing it.
They did?
Carrie's reacting. Yeah, I haven't seen a thing for a long time. Anyway, it
Oh,
was a great program, and if you have a chance to sign up in the future for any kind of mentorship, people really love doing them, authors and also, beginning writers. So do those things when you see them.
mhm.
And I used to co-direct Pitch Fest at Thriller Fest, which was a blast. If you've ever pitched there, what an afternoon that is that we all have. I love cheese, and recently I have been just absorbing Ashley Winstead's entire catalog, and I had the pleasure of meeting her at Thriller Fest, and what a gem she is. So read her books.
Nice. All right, a little bit more about me. So, my focus is helping novelists of many genres, including mystery, thriller, suspense, and horror, plan, draft, and revise with confidence. As Sam likes to say, I'm a bit of a magpie when it comes to my coaching because I read all over the place and I like to coach a little bit all over the place too. I do specialize in fiction, and my superpower is synthesizing plot and character, and I ask a lot of questions. So anyone who's come to the retreat or ever coached me just knows I'm full of questions, always with the goal of driving you towards figuring out the best story that you can possibly tell. So I was, I guess, a WFWA mentor. I didn't realize they'd stop doing it. I did one
They
in the
might bring it back.
fall. Hmm?
They
I
might
did
bring
one
it
in the
back.
fall, but maybe they're bringing
Oh,
it
great.
back.
Great.
And also, I'm a Sisters in Crime mentor, which I am doing right now. I actually just talked to my mentee on Monday. She's amazing and wonderful and making great progress. So that was cool. Ditto what Sam said about if you see these programs out there, definitely take advantage of them because they're fantastic. I also love cheese and good wine, and I am currently growing 6 different kinds of tomatoes, and they love the hot weather, unlike me. So they're happy, and I'm not, but that's okay. We're just gonna keep moving.
All right, so we'll just quickly go through the retreat and what the society is. So the retreat, we are different in that we focus on plot, not your pages. So a lot of retreats focus on like their first 20 pages, first 50. We actually don't read your writing except for the application. We focus on the high level stuff. It is where we love to sit, and this entire presentation is focused on what you will take away from the retreat. But very quickly, it's a VIP weekend designed to transform your work in progress from a super vague idea into a full roadmap. We do tons of personal coaching feedback, and we have a post-retreat brainstorming call, which is oftentimes just a blast to talk about their next project. We had a few people who like totally finished drafting and then were on to their next one by the time we did this last year. This year, it is September 17th through 21st in the same haunted hotel in Salem, Massachusetts, and we are closing applications in 12 days. So we are filling up, and if you would like to join us, we would love to have you. Please make sure you apply. You can go on shadowsandsecrets.com to do that.
Great. And the society. So, what is the society? As we mentioned, this is our online membership for the MTS and horror authors who are looking for a community of like-minded folks. As you may know, if you've been out in the world a little bit and you've been in writing groups, sometimes writing groups are not super amenable to MTS authors, or they just maybe think you're a little weird or obsessed with murder, which, you know, we all kind of are sometimes because that's the kind of thing that we're writing. This is a group of like-minded folks who won't look at you funny. If you're like want to plot on what is the best way to poison your antagonist or something like that. We love talking murder and creepy things that scare you and go bump in the night. So we also it's centered around coaching, craft instruction, and even more. Mainly the two things that happen every month are a 90-minute hot seat coaching session, which is broken down into 15-minute increments for anybody who wants to apply, who's in the community, and wants to get both Sam and my brain on some aspect of your story that is driving you crazy, you want to brainstorm some solutions to things, or want another take on like how many POVs should I have? Is this POV pulling its weight? Basically anything that comes up. And then we have had time so far to sort of open things up at the end of each session, and it's just sort of an AMA. I don't want to say free for all, but anyone who has questions, even if you haven't applied for a hot seat coaching session, we usually have time to answer questions that way. And the other thing we do is a monthly deep dive. If you've seen Sam and I's deep dives discussions on the thrillers that we love and love to deconstruct, those are available publicly. So what we do is we record those, and then we turn off the public facing cameras and we open it up and have a big sort of book club group discussion about the book. And those have been super fun as well,
So
especially
fun.
when, there's aspects of things that maybe people didn't love as much as Sam and I did. And we get to just talk about what works for who and why. And that's really great. We also have twice monthly write-in sessions. So, cameras off, silent, just work, work, work. And then, of course, you get access to all of our Shadows webinars. Not all of these are public forever. Most of them are not actually, but they are available to you in the library if you are a society member. So it is $49 a month. We deliberately want to keep it as affordable as we can, and it's cancelable anytime because we would rather spend our time coaching than having to fuss around with admin, and we want it to be easy for you and for us. So that is the society.
Alrighty. So in the next 20 minutes, we are going to go over the core story decisions we believe that every story, and this is not actually unique to MTS and horror, I think it just applies across the board, but particularly in MTS and horror, should have in place before you fast draft or enter revision. So this is not a ding on people who are able to pants an entire story. Bless you. I cannot do it. I end up in corners that I can't write my way out of. But at a certain point, you do need to understand the scaffolding of your story and understand the answers to some of these big questions.
And so, yeah, specifically what Sam and I are talking about are the title to your story, the story question, the inciting incident, the emotional aha, and then these would probably be specific to MTS and horror is your midpoint twist, your climactic twist, and your final twist. So we're going to do a mini dive into each of these things over the course of the next 20 minutes. And these, as we mentioned, are the things that we do a deep dive on over the course of the pre-work, the coaching retreat, and the post-retreat, just to make sure all of these things are solid and you can fast draft or revise with efficiency and confidence. So let's take them one by one.
Sure. So, title, this seems like not that big of a deal, but it really makes a huge difference psychologically when you name the project that you're working on, even if it's not the final title, even if it's something, it's, I don't know, you don't want to name it like this summer's book or something, but, for example, the title I have for my current book that I'm working on is not at all what it'll end up being because it doesn't make any sense. But it works for me for like how I feel about it. And I think that that's really important. And so, it's the first indication outwardly of the kind of story it is. So once you land on a title, which can happen anywhere from the very beginning up, right up until publishing, it's going to indicate to the reader what they're dealing with, right? Genre expectations. Like if you name something Murder House, there's going to be some expectations that it's not a romance, for example. And so just think about that. Carrie and I both like to use word cloud. So if we have somebody who's kind of struggling with what they want to name their book, it's like, okay, well, just write down all the words that kind of resonate for you about this story. Darkness, like looking in windows, creepiness, whatever, haunting, and see what you can stick together. And then, of course, there's, you have to go and look on Amazon and see if somebody else has named their book that. And we have all kinds of advice on like how to come up with, you don't want it to be too long, you don't want it to be too short, etc. But it's just so important for your personal ownership over your project. And again, this caveat, they change all the time, and that's okay. But I think it's really nice to have something in your head where you're like, I am working on Murder House today. And,
Mhm.
don't name your book that. There's probably like 15 books that are named that. But yeah.
So the next thing, and I don't know, they're all really important, but this one
They
really
are.
stands out to me. I feel like this is like if you're going to put it up, this is like 1A or 1B, and that's your story question, right? Because the story question is essentially the point of the story. So, why are we here? What is making someone want to pick up this book and read it? What are we going to learn? What adventure are you going to take me on? That is the thing that the story question is going to pose to me as the reader so that I know, and oh, okay, great. Yes, I want to go on this adventure with you. So like a couple of examples that we have here, like who stole the thing, who committed the murder, who's going to blow up the world? Is the world going to blow up? Is someone going to be able to save the world before it blows up? And what the story question points to is the climactic scene, right? This is where that question gets answered. This is when we know, okay, like even on the book jacket copy, so and so, like who killed so and so. The climactic scene is when we find out the answer to that story question. So that's what makes it so fundamental, right? We sort of pose it up front with the inciting incident, which we'll talk about in a second, but it's answered in the climactic scene. So there is a huge chunk of the journey that you've taken us on. So the examples, yeah, like the dead body in the first scene, the killer is revealed in the climactic scene. So there are these lovely bookends, and it's not necessarily the very beginning and the very end of your book, but it does give you a sense of that complete arc in a way. That's the complete plot arc that you're looking for. And so in mystery thriller and suspense, the story question does not need to be answered by the supervillain. And if you've ever heard Sam talk about twists and villains, you know exactly what we're talking about here. It's not the mastermind, or it doesn't have to be the mastermind that is the person who's like who we're dealing with in the climactic scene. In fact, it often isn't, right, Sam? It's usually someone else that has been very involved, and we think that they are answering like they are our supervillain, but that person is actually then revealed in the final twist. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the twist conversation, but that's story question. Sam,
It
anything to
is.
add on that?
No, it's one of these things where once you land on it, it feels right. It kind of clunks into place. And often when we're drafting, it can feel a little amorphous and you're like, well, it's what is this person doing and like what are they going to end up doing or whatever. But there's always going to be an MTS, some sort of big question that you are seeking to answer with the climactic scene, and the more simple, the better.
Mhm.
Who committed the murder is a classic for a reason, and that's totally fine if that's your story question.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of those places where people could get worried. It's like when we
Hmm.
ask sometime about what's the point, and if the point sounds like a cliche, and I always say like that's okay. That's one of those places where it's okay to be cliched because you're tapping into a universal. And I would
Yeah.
say it's a similar kind of thing here, whereas like who committed the murder, like it's a classic for a reason, right? You're going
Hmm.
to make it unique with the characters and what you put them through and all of that kind of stuff. That's where your personal spin comes on it.
Yeah,
It doesn't
absolutely.
always have to be, like this story question that no one's ever thought of before. If you can, great, but if not, it's not a cause for concern.
Yeah. All right, the inciting incident very closely tied to the story question because this is where the story question is presented typically, right? So it's the event that occurs at or near the start of the story, and we did a deep dive last week where we determined the inciting incident might have been before the story started, which is not typically what we recommend, but it can happen.
Mhm.
And it's the main point is that it sets the main character on the journey. It changes their life. It upsets the status quo. It's the reason that they enter the story. And so, this is a choice. It has agency. And so, if we have a main character who, I'm going to go on the dead body thing again. Like, if you find a dead body, you have some choices, right? You can be like, not for me. I am not today, and walk away from it. Or you can be like, I'm going to solve this. Or you can call the cops and then somebody sees you calling the cops and then off to the races we go, right? Because that person is going to try to stop you from doing the thing. The inciting incident is always going to be something that the protagonist has, right? You can have inciting incidents for your sub main characters, but this is our main person entering the story. There's a reason they're entering it at this time. It's be Kerry and I, don't totally agree on this, but like I think that inciting incident should be like at the end of chapter one, just in general. And there are examples that Kerry has pointed out that I agree with where it can be like a little bit further on, like before that, in the first 10% or something. So it kind of is story dependent, but in general, the sooner we get into the story, the sooner that we have a reason for entering on this day, and we answer that question of why on this day with the inciting incident, then the better off you're going to be. Um, yeah, and we have this example of Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. Lydia is dead, but they don't know this yet. Killer, killer opening line. Obviously, the inciting incident happened before, right? And that's okay because we know that, Lydia dying is the inciting incident, right? You're the one who's read this book more thoroughly
Yeah,
than I have.
yeah, it's the thing that kicks off the whole journey as
Right.
we go on in the book.
Right. So haven't read this book, should, it's on my list. But I was able to interpret and, get that just from the opening line because we are told so clearly what's going on. And it sets up the story question. So if you're finding a dead body, it's who killed the person. If you're discovering that you need to steal something or you're about to commit a heist, it's like, well, here's the reason that we have to go and commit the heist right now. If you discover the bomb that's going to blow up the world, then it's who's setting off the bomb and why, right? So it's the thing, and then we're answering in the climactic scene the story question. And hopefully I said that in a way that actually made sense because just listening to myself, it was a little all over the place. So we will continue on. If you have questions at the end, please ask them.
All right. So next up, we have another like super important thing, and this is sort of, if you say the story question is like the plot driver, the emotion, the character driver is going to be your emotional aha moment, right? And it's the single moment that it totally flips the script on the protagonist's view of this misbelief that they have been carrying around, right? So if they don't think that they're strong enough to get through all of this, and they think that they're deficient in some way, they've been battling with that on the psychological level throughout the course of the book. And then when we get to the climactic scene, this is the moment where they realize, oh no, I can do this. I am strong enough. I am worthy of this thing. And actually, I'll back up 1 second and just say, I just said the climactic scene. Sam has this great presentation that she did. We should resurrect it again. I'm not sure if it's one of the publicly available ones, but it doesn't, it can often happen in the climactic scene, but it doesn't have to happen in the climactic scene. It can happen somewhere in the last like 20% of the book. And as with the inciting incident, as we were just talking about, it typically will happen, I think, in the climactic scene or very close to it, but it doesn't have to. And the decision, the reason, the way that you figure that out, I should say, is what is working best for the book, right? It's going to have these sort of ebbs and flows. And there is going to be a point that you're going to reach where they're going to have this moment or they can't move forward. The book will come to a screeching halt because, like the inciting incident, if they don't have this emotional aha moment, the other option is them picking up their ball and going home. And that's a terrible and unsatisfying thing to do to your reader, especially when they're 75, 80, 85% of the way through the book. They will really be mad at you. We do not want that. So they have to have this emotional climactic moment of being like, oh shit, I am strong enough. I can survive this. and I'm going to take charge. And it's the moment where they have a lot of agency, where things sort of transform for them. And this realization triggers the action that they are going to take to help resolve the story question, right? It's usually a single line in the manuscript. It's often preceded by something that's external. So, but it's usually this moment where you can pinpoint, you can look at, they have a thought or they say out loud, like, I can do this thing. I am worthy of this thing. Often it can be just like their interiority and they're thinking it. And where we see it manifest is in their actions, what they are going to go, the things that they're then going to go do because they realize, oh, I've been holding myself back for all this time. Now that I'm clear on what I'm going to do, I'm going to go forth, take action, solve the problem.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the
The
emotional aha.
the only thing I'd add here is that it always comes after the Dark Night of the Soul. Like we're never
Ooh,
going to have an
yes.
emotional aha where I can do this, I can survive this before they have the crisis. And
Yes.
the Dark Night of the Soul always precedes the climactic scene. So in that way, you're going to have your ramp up of suspense. You're going to have like, ah, I can't do this. I'm going to die, whatever. I'm not worthy of love. Super dark, super depressing, bottom out, rock bottom, and then you have the climactic scene. Sometimes you can enter the climactic scene with that attitude of like, well, whatever, I'm going to die anyway. Or it can be, oh, I can survive this and I know how. And so I'm entering the climactic scene with power as opposed to no power. But at some point before the end of the book, you're going to have this emotional realization of like, oh, I am. And I've seen it, we've both seen it between anywhere between the beginning of the climactic scene, like before they even enter it, all the way through up until the last page, where it's like, oh, I made it through this thing. I can, whatever it is. Yeah, it's a fun one to play with.
Hmm.
Often the most complicated because it's pretty subtle. But even if you have a character who's, like I would say a lot of like I'll pick on Jason Bourne just because it's in my head, but like those kinds of stories where it's just like it's all action and it's all like truth, action thriller where we're stopping worldwide destruction, the external, like the emotional change throughout doesn't necessarily need to be like I'm not worthy of love to I am worthy of love, which is a pretty big realization. It can be something smaller like, oh, I thought I couldn't do this, but I can. I am more capable than I think I am. Because we don't ever want to have a character who just comes in and is like, I am great and this is no problem and I'm just gonna breeze through this entire thing with no danger because that's super boring, right? We want to see people be put in peril. We want to see them change. And so the emotional aha is just the crux of that change, whatever that ends up being. So can be subtle, can be big, depending on how deep you want to go.
And to the point you were just talking about, Sam, if you do have that character that comes in all bluster and self-confidence, usually it's like it's a devolution, right? They
Yeah.
are rapidly shown that like no, they don't know everything, they can't do everything. Like that's what makes it interesting. It's just facing the obstacles that we as cruel, wonderful writers put in their place so we can see how they then overcome them because that's what makes a story interesting to us as humans.
Words
I
to
think
live
a
by.
good example of an emotional aha that may not come in the climactic scene was the last word, which Sam and I did a deep dive on. I feel like
Yeah.
she goes into the climactic scene, if I'm remembering correctly, just being sort of resolved to die. She's like, you know what, it's this is what's going to happen to me, and I'm going to go out fighting, but like this is my time. So I'm not going to lay down. But she doesn't have her emotional aha moment until almost the very end of the book, I believe.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it works well. It's
it
also a
does.
suspenseful thing. Like the more you kind of draw out the aha, the more that we're like, are you going to make it? Are you going to realize this? Are you going to be able to have the power again?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okie dokie.
we
Oh,
had a
look at
second
us.
one. I didn't realize, I forgot about that. So, yeah, as Sam said, always preceded by the Dark Night of the Soul, which really makes sense when you think about it, because when are you primed to have these emotional aha moments, these sort of light bulb moments when you feel like all is lost, everything is shit, I can't go on. And then from somewhere you find the strength or you realize that, like, oh no, I can do this. It's always darkest before dawn, right? So we talked about the timing a little bit already, and then agency changes depending on the timing, and the aha moment begets agency, as we were saying, because it's the resolution or sorry, the realization and then transforming into action.
Yeah. I think my favorite example of an emotional aha in horror is The Descent. If anyone's seen that movie? Super scary. It's one of my most favorite horror movies. And basically, without ruining anything, this is typical horror, but it's just like the main character's like, not today, monsters, and just goes for it at the end. And it's like there's like rivers of blood and like, just total badassery. And it's really, really satisfying because you're just like, okay, well, you're prepared to die, but you're also just like, not by this, like, don't come at me. And it's really, really, really empowering. Really great movie to watch if you're having a bad day. I'll say that.
Nice. All
And if you
right.
watch it and think that I'm nuts, you're welcome to my friend group. All right. So the midpoint twist. This is the midpoint turn. It's a classic literary device. Carrie and I think we would agree on this. It needs to be present in every single book that exists out in the world. It is the point at which your main character can no longer exit the story. So up until that point, they always have the choice of like, oh, I'm going to keep like playing with this. I'm going to keep pursuing this. And then, but I could just say no and just back out of this and that would be fine. The midpoint is when everything takes a turn and it becomes very clear that they have to see this through or they will be killed, usually if it's MTS. Probably not in like literary fiction or romance. Um, but it's the point where they have to make a decision to continue being in the story, which makes it very, very satisfying, right? Because we see this agency and we see new motivations. We might see a new prime suspect. That's a classic for mysteries, is that your main suspect gets killed at the 50% point and you're like, well, shit, somebody else is out there. But it is, a really satisfying turn. And my most favorite thing is to look at the book when we get to the midpoint, because it's usually really obvious, or in a movie and pause it and be like, ooh, exactly 50%, right? That's awesome when that happens. Anything between like, 47 and 53 is fine, depending on how it lands, because this can be very difficult to figure out until you're actually done with the book to get it to be exactly 50% of the way through. So just keep in mind, it's like this midpoint turn. And just a reminder that twists themselves are just assumptions by the protagonist that are then proved wrong. It is the reveal of a truth about what's actually going on. And so your villain is down here beneath the surface of the story doing their thing. The twists, like the midpoint, the climactic, and the final, are the reveals of what is actually happening. And your protagonist is going to have been assuming something else up until that point. And the fact that they are wrong is what makes it twisty because they have assumed logically what might have been going on otherwise. And so your midpoint isn't necessarily your mastermind villain putting something in the way, but it will be something that's truth about what is actually going on in the story. So it could be that a red herring is proved wrong. It could be just that, somebody dies and that was your protagonist's main suspect. So just think through, like, the midpoint does need to be a truth that sort of changes the course of the story and sets us on what our ramp up to the climactic scene.
Yeah, I'll just add, if you're like Sam was saying, this actually is present, maybe not quite as explicitly as a twist in just about every book. And if you're familiar with Save the Cat at all, this is like the way that they define that is at like the false victory or the false defeat, right? So characters had all the fun and games, they get to the midpoint, they think everything is great, I have won, and then everything is going to start to go way downhill fast. Or
Yeah.
I've just lost. It's like a mini all is lost moment, and then things kind of start to get better until they fall apart again. So with MTS, it's just specifically the way that comes out in this particular genre is usually with one of these kind of twisty moments that we love so much.
Indeed.
So then we get to the climactic twist, which we've talked a bit about already, and that's usually at between 80 and 85%. You can see Sam and I talk about these in our deep dives all the time, and it is very satisfying when we get to those points in the books and you look at the Kindle percentage or you do a quick little bit of math, and there it is right there in those percentages, like, yes, nailed it. So as we've said already, like the climactic twist is the moment where the story question gets answered, right? So who is responsible for everything that happened in the inciting incident? Who's responsible for setting our protagonist off on their journey? And what question is now being answered? It's revealing some assumptions that, again, like as with any twisty moment in a book, there have been some assumptions that the protagonist has made that are incorrect, logical, but incorrect. And now we're learning that they are incorrect and then why and how, like what the real story behind all of it is. So, e.g., twist, as we said here. Um, it is usually a confrontation with the fake villain. So, not our super mastermind who has been pulling a lot of strings. And as Sam said, like in her little thing, like bobbing below the surface, doing all of the stuff that they do, is a person that we have grown probably to be convinced this is the person. And the reason this moment is twisty is because we find out, like, oh no, it's not that person. In fact, there's somebody else responsible for all of this stuff. And we don't usually get that confirmed until a little bit later. This moment dives us into this last bit of the book. So it gives us a little bit of a release because we know the story question has been answered, right? And there's some satisfaction in that. And we've connected some of the dots for our readers. So again, at this moment, there is some satisfying like story release here because we like, okay, like they've not set me up to be disgruntled or to send me away with things unanswered. A lot of that, if not all of it, is answered here in the climactic twist. And then we're launched into what we think is sort of the denouement and a calmer moment. But then again, if you're reading a modern thriller, you know that that's not actually. The writer still has some tricks up their sleeve for you. And that's going to lead us into the final twist.
Yeah, so a thing here is that, we're talking about the three main twists. Modern thrillers might have upwards of 10 twists, right? Because as we reveal all these assumptions between the climax and the final twist, there's going to be a lot that pops up because we're going to be explaining all of the assumptions that were incorrect throughout the book. And so I don't know. I mean, every thriller I've read in the last year, we've had like this big climactic twist, and then it's like boom, 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 and I think that that works really well to make it super sticky for the reader. It
Mhm.
requires a lot of work on behalf of the author because you have to set up all this stuff throughout the book in order to be able to prove it wrong in this last 15%. And it can sort of at some point feel a little like back heavy on the story if we have all this kind of explanation happening in the last 15%. And so that's something to sort of just be aware of, but it absolutely works. Like Kerry and I have read so many stories this year where, we've had all these reveals happening in the last 15% and it works. It doesn't feel too heavy.
Mhm.
And so the final twist, usually 98%, as Kerry was saying in the climactic twist, this is when we sort of reveal that learn, read. What was I trying to say? It doesn't matter. Anyway, we are in the climactic twist and we understand that not as all as it seems, right? So we understand who committed the murder that the inciting incident brought up, but we then learn that this is actually part of, a way bigger series of murders, or the motivation is not at all what we thought it was. And this person was forced into committing this murder, and so there's a reason that they are our fake villain, and there's somebody else kind of behind the scenes kind of pulling the strings and making sure that all this happens in the way that they wanted it to. That person is your super villain, your mastermind villain. They may not have actually committed the murder, but they are the reason that it happened.
Mhm.
And so all of this comes to light at the very final end of the book, 98% typically. And it's when this truth is revealed, and we do have an explanation about what was actually happening this whole time. And this is when your reader looks back at everything that you've already written and looks for holes to see if you've lied to them, to see if you haven't given them enough in order to be able to solve this on their own, which is where these little clues need to be very carefully peppered throughout so that your reader gets that satisfaction of solving it. Um, but it's a super satisfying few pages. You will have a denouement. You're going to have some kind of explanation of why this has all been happening. It may not be super long, but we do need something in there to explain this is why this person was doing this, because we don't care about what we do, but we mostly care about why. And in MTS, you do need to have this chaos brought to order. Horror is an exception. You can have chaos brought to maximum outer chaos. Like we haven't actually solved, we've solved it, but the supervillain escapes, or, we learn that it's actually way worse than we thought, not way better. There are all kinds of things you can play with that. But 98% final twist, so satisfying. And this is where Kerry and I coach, is determining who this supervillain is. This is like the second step. As soon as you've kind of come up with the concept of the story, we're like, okay, who's the villain? What do they want? Why are they doing this? Why are they taking the nuclear option and not just bailing when it becomes difficult, when your protagonist ruins their life by amateur sleuthing their way into what you're trying to accomplish. So this is a very, very important and I think the key to writing an excellent MTS story is figuring out who this person is and what they're up to.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things that when Sam first taught me about all of this, I think I was a little head exploding emoji because I never would have thought of it that way, but it makes so much sense that you can't have this satisfying progression and this sort of gasp worthy final twist unless you really understand who the supervillain is and why they're doing what they're doing, because really we don't see it as readers, but they're driving all of the action. They're the ones who are laying out all of the things that our protagonists are going to, misunderstand and misinterpret. And that's when when they finally do get those like moments where those real reveals happen and we put those pieces together, those are the satisfying moments. So if you don't know that, if you're just following your protagonist through, you can get to a certain point in a story, but to really build those satisfying moments for the readers that modern thriller and MTS readers expect, you have to know what this person is up to. You have to know what your supervillain is up to. And it's a great like bookend way to look at, you have these pieces that we've talked about in terms of the inciting incident and the emotional aha moment. Those are like super important things, but they're all deriving from what this one character wants and is trying to get, and how the other character, your protagonist, is going to like butt up against those all along the way. So if you don't know those things, it's going to be really, really hard to craft the book that you want to craft in this space.
Yeah, very well said. And the supervillain, in case it wasn't clear, is your antagonist, and your protagonist is the one who's experiencing the story. So I like to define MTS as, this is really the supervillain story. The protagonist is just there to experience it. And so we need to understand what the supervillain is doing in order for the story to actually work. Even if they're off screen like 99% of the time, we still need to understand them.
So there we go.
There we go. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah.
Welcome to July 3rd, which apparently is a chaos day for both of us.
Oh, I think it's too hot. It's too
It
hot
is
over
too hot.
here.
Too hot.
Uh,
All right. Shall we turn off the recording, Kerry? And thank you all. If you're listening to this on the internet, thank you for
yes.
coming and listening to us. We appreciate you. Please come and check us out on shadowsandsecrets.com. We would love to hear from you. Love to have you be a part of the society. Love to see you in a haunted hotel. It is haunted. Can attest. Very uncomfortable, but also awesome. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.